Hello, everyone. I hope you managed to slide in a little cup of tea or whatever your particular preferred poison might be. And now it's time to learn a little bit more about the Performance Academy. And so I'm going to hand over to Charlie Ward and Professor Matthew Reason. Over to you, Matthew and Charlie.
Thank you, Jonathan. And hello, everyone. So as Jonathan said, I'm Matthew Reason. I'm Professor of Theatre and Performance at York St John University. And it's been great listening to all the panels and discussions so far today. So this session will focus on the Performing Arts Academy on questions of training, learning and teaching for learning disabled and autistic artists. The particular context for this has been mentioned a couple of times, but worth mentioning again, I think. So that's in the spring, Mind the Gap and York St John successfully worked together to validate the Mind the Gap Academy as a certificate in higher education in the performing arts. So the programme is now recognised as what in the UK is called a level 4 qualification. That's equivalent to the first year of a BA degree course. And that's, if we've been repeating it, I think that's because it's something that's worth shouting about. So we're going to talk a bit more about that today. In the session, first of all, myself and Charlie, who I know you've already met, are going to talk for about 20 minutes or so about some elements of our process of validating the Academy. And then we're going to be joined by colleagues from OGMIUS and from Moomsteatern to talk about elements of how they engage with formalised teaching and training in their contexts. Throughout this, if people have any questions, as before, if people want to put those in the questions box at the end of those talks, we'll have some time for questions and answers and discussion. So we're going to be talking about the challenges and opportunities for formalising training and learning in 3 sections, overviews and histories. We're going to focus on assessment and feedback. And then we're going to talk about the benefits and purpose, both from the perspective of Mind the Gap and from the university. So Charlie, could you kick us off by talking about the overview and history for Mind the Gap Academy?
I sure can. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to have you all here. It's been really nice to host this event today with our European partners and have such support from our attendees. So it's really nice to have you all here. So I'm Charlie. I'm the Academy Director at Mind the Gap. And I thought there might be lots of people here who know about Mind the Gap, but for those who don't, just give you a speedy history lesson for those people who are not familiar before sort of launching into our academy and all of that information. So Mind the Gap has been making and touring and work for over 30 years, beginning back in 1988, and we are England's leading learning disability performance and live arts company. Our main mission as a company is to collaborate with learning disabled artists to create bold, cutting-edge performance and live arts events. Our artists at Mind the Gap are the real core to the company and what we stand for, and we don't just work nationally, we also perform internationally too. So for the last 20 years, alongside making and touring, building the company's reputation, we've also developed what we now call quite a large academy that is at Mind the Gap Studios, where students are able to come and develop their performance skills at various different levels. Beginning with just one theatre programme called Making Waves back in 1998, it was really clear that running a training programme that could also train the performers in the work that both developing us as a company, but also recognising that there wasn't really anything else out there like this. The training that was giving the performers the skills to not only work professionally, but equip them to also make work outside Mind the Gap. There was definitely demand for this. And if we flash forward 20 years, here we are with 5 part-time training programmes in various art forms such as dance, theatre and music, along with now our level 4 training programme, which I'll get to shortly. I suppose it's just worth saying demand for this type of training has just been increasing over the last years, and ever more so in my sort of 14 years at Mind the Gap. And each year we are always oversubscribed for our courses. Every year we have more and more people audition. And currently, going into September, into the autumn period, we are now able to offer over 90 places on all of our academy programmes that are all run at our wonderful studios. I laugh because, in fact, the last few years, we've outgrown our space just to feed the demand for this type of training. So to get to what we're here to chat about today, after working with York St John over the last few years on various different projects and strands of the company, we have been successful, as Matthew said, in validating our full-time Performance Academy training programme as a certificate in higher education, working at level 4. As Academy Director, I've been thinking for quite a long time, especially over the last 5 years or so, on just how good and unique the offer is on the full-time training programme, and there isn't many places out there that can offer this level of training. We formed excellent relationships with some fantastic artists in and around the UK who are not just performers but facilitators that deliver brilliant skills-based sessions on our programme, and just feel like it's more important than ever now that this level of training should be recognised, and that still people with a disability and or autism are struggling more than non-disabled artists to gain employment in the arts. So speaking to Professor Matthew Reason from York St John as we've begun to work together more on other projects, it became really clear that we should work together and see how a partnership could lead to recognising this level of performing arts training. In order to get this programme validated, Matthew and I spent a lot of time sort of looking at the programme, breaking it up, dissecting all the good bits, and just trying to see how we could make it, as strong as we possibly could. One of the big focuses over the last sort of couple of years developing the programme is sort of not just focusing on performance skills, and that actually to be a performer in the arts industry, you also need to know about the art industry. So quite a lot of work that we've been doing as a company over the last couple of years over various strands of our different programmes is looking at progression routes, is looking at next steps, is looking at sort of sending people out into the big wide world, not just as excellent performers, but also have that wider industry studies knowledge. So that being said, kind of one of the driving forces of the programme and one of the modules we're really excited about is something called industry studies, which we've been developing as one of the modules amongst sort of choreography, music composition, music production, physical theatre skills, because we really acknowledge that a level 4 training programme should also include this. It shouldn't just be about how good you are on stage, but can also open other opportunities within the arts, the wider arts sector. So yeah, that's just an example of one of our modules and something we've been sort of really working on while we've been kind of making this programme as strong as possible. So yeah, we're going to be offering various modules in dance, in theatre, in music, along with industry studies, and yeah, just a really exciting programme. We're all really excited for this next phase, but I think it's probably really obvious to say that the biggest journey we've been on sort of developing this programme is around assessment and how we ensure that we are going to be delivering the programme at level 4, whilst ensuring that we've got the right students on the programme, but also that the students can access it. Some of the decisions we've made is that the programme will be 3 years long. So at level 4, for those people who kind of don't understand all of that jargon, level 4 is sort of the first year of a university degree. And one of the things we've put in place is that students are able to learn over 3 years at this level, and just gives them a little longer to get the skills before they then maybe potentially move on to level 5, or potentially move on to another training or get a job in the arts world. So yeah, assessment's been looking at assessment and how we formalise it, because Mind the Gap doesn't in the academy formalise it in quite the same way. So that's been one of our biggest journeys, and just trying to make sure we get that right. So yeah, it's just a bit of an overview of the company, the academy, and kind of where we're at on our journey with this performing arts course. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Matthew, who's going to talk a bit more in depth about that journey of assessment and some of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Charlie. So as Charlie said, in the process of validating the academy, one of the things we knew we'd need to look at was assessment. So previously the academy had moments where students would share work. They had moments of feedback, and they had moments of evaluation and talking about what might be improved, but they didn't have formal moments of assessment. And part of us would probably have liked to have kept it that way. So assessment is synonymous with education. If we think of formal education, we often think of exams, tests, grades, essays. And yet you'd be hard pressed to find many people within education, and certainly in arts education, who are particularly fond of assessment, or particularly like it very much. Assessment is the highest element of higher education in universities that receives the lowest satisfaction scores from students. It's the thing students complain about most in terms of fairness, in terms of transparency, in terms of understanding what they're being assessed on, and it causes the most grief. So, as I said, maybe a part of us would have liked to have ignored assessment entirely. So why are we introducing it to the academy, and why did we spend so long thinking about it? The first reason is to do with what the validation of the programme means and symbolises. As a certificate in higher education, we're asserting that the work and attainment of students on the Mind the Gap programme would be of the same standard of that of any other students on any other level 4 programme in the performing arts in any other university across the UK. And anybody with the knowledge of the histories of exclusion and marginalisation of people with learning disabilities and autism from the education system, and indeed from performing arts courses in particular, should be immediately aware of the significance of that statement. But in order to make that statement, in order to say the attainment is the same here as it would be on any other course, we needed to engage with these formalised processes of assessment and everything that comes with them. Processes that universities have developed in order to determine the quality and level of student attainment. So we therefore needed to demonstrate that assessment at Mind the Gap was rigorous, that it was benchmarked against national standards, but at the same time that it didn't replicate university structures which university students themselves often find alienating or inaccessible. So how could we do better than that by working with Mind the Gap to develop inclusive and accessible assessment structures? We also wanted to understand how prospective students perceived assessment and feedback, to respond to their needs, and to develop a model that was understandable to them themselves. And that's key. Assessment must feel meaningful to the people who are being assessed. Students must understand its processes, its vocabulary, its purpose. Without this, assessment becomes something done to students in a mysterious and almost violent manner. We wanted to develop an assessment process that was responsive to Mind the Gap's context and its students. To find out what that might look like, we held 2 focus groups with a combination of current students and Mind the Gap artists who had completed previous programmes. We used these focus groups to explore with the participants what assessment and feedback meant to them, to discuss both negative and positive experiences of assessment, and to explore what kind of language we should use around assessment. And I'm going to just pull out a few elements that emerged from the focus group and how that shaped our thinking. First, assessment had most meaning for students in terms of personal goals rather than abstract levels. For example, one student stated, "We have evaluations at the end of the year, and I like that. It is things you need to work on, like your goals. I like them because it means I've set myself a goal." Second, several students reported negative experiences of assessment from school or other formal education. This was often associated with grades and words like fail. For example, one student said, "When I was at college and being watched by somebody writing things down, I get really nervous in case I fail. I feel a bit put off. I get a little paranoid about what they are writing down. I feel like they are watching to try and put me off, to make me fail." Third, students at Mind the Gap had a really strong understanding of the value of feedback. They discussed the value of feedback in developing their artistic practice in a very sophisticated manner. They knew what it was for, they knew what it looked like, and so on. This was something that Mind the Gap have invested time in exploring and underpinning with their students. It's part of what is now becoming the industry studies module Charlie mentioned. So feedback was understood and appreciated. Again, to present one student statement, "Feedback is not just things you can improve on, but also things that you're really good at. And it gives you an explanation as to why it was good." Drawing on these 3 insights and others, we've developed the following 3-point approach to assessment within the Academy. First, it must be accessible and understandable to the students themselves. Second, it should reflect the Academy's strong focus on engaging with process and individual goals. And third, it should work with feedback so students can recognise their own achievements. So in order to reflect this, what we've validated in the certificate in higher education has 2 elements. First, assessment doesn't take place at single points, but in what we've termed a living portfolio that students accumulate through the year. This enables regular, timely and constructive feedback linked directly to moments of performing. And second, we've developed and got through university regulations at some complexity, a 3-point marking scale. So rather than grading students, we award one of 3 descriptors, which are improving, achieving, excelling. So improving indicates that a student needs more time to reach their desired goals. Achieving indicates that a student has reached the expected learning outcomes. And excelling indicates that a student has gone beyond expected levels of achievement. And we tested this language with participants, with the students, and I want to share some of their feedback. In response to improving, a student said, if someone said improving to me, I would probably feel a bit like I must have made a little mistake, but then I know that I've got another chance at improving. The word achieving, I like the word achieving. It means it's something positive you've done. You can still maybe improve it, just in case you still need some work on it. And excelling means you've reached something really, really good, and you know you've done amazingly well, and then you get really good feedback out of it. Through this process of working between Mind the Gap, the university, and the students themselves, we're hopeful that we're putting in place an approach to assessment that does the job of having rigour and fairness, and that demonstrates the course is benchmarked against those across the country, that it reaches this standard, and we can demonstrate that important point of quality, that learning disabled and autistic students are reaching and performing at a quality equivalent to other courses, but that this is student-led and is responsive in an inclusive and accessible manner. So we want to move on now to consider why we did this. It was quite a long process, and for Charlie in particular, involved a lot of paperwork. So Charlie, what for you was the benefit and purpose of engaging with the university on this process?
I think it's something similar to what you said at the beginning, which was we keep mentioning that it's level 4 because we think it's worth mentioning. And I think, not just the fact that there isn't many places to do it, so we should shout about it. It's the fact that the level of training can provide somebody an opportunity for stage or screen. We say it all the time, there should be more diversity on our stages and screens, and we are still hearing that, yeah, you don't have to have a degree to be a performer, but you still need to acknowledge that you have adequate training, as it were. So I think for me, one of the benefits is just really showcasing the students that we work with, and really giving them the recognition that they deserve, that they've been through this rigorous training, they have the skills, not just as performance, but as performers, but in other areas, and that they should be accessing this employment just as much as anyone else. And I think as well, a lot of the work that we've done just recently isn't just about training people to be on stage, but other areas in the arts industry, director training, producer training. So those opportunities that should be there, that the people that we work with have the training in. I think, yeah, and also just if we can do it, we encourage others and gives people the confidence to also do it.
Absolutely. From the university's perspective, there were also some different benefits or different reasons we wanted to get involved with supporting Mind the Gap in this process. As a university, York St John has within its mission statement that it seeks to stand up for social justice. One way a university can do that is through widening participation in education, broadening the opportunities that come from higher education to individuals and groups that might have previously been excluded. So the partnership and validation of this process challenges some of the presumptions about who education, particularly higher education, is for. And that's something that as a university, we want to do. So through the partnership, we seek ways to collaborate with Mind the Gap in a way that in some ways challenges some of the problematic elements of universities and university education. And we also want to give our own students a really rich experience. We want them to work with and alongside learning disabled and autistic students at Mind the Gap as equals. And this is one way of doing that. So our campus becomes a rich, vibrant, diverse space that is therefore more impactful experience for our students. And finally, in a culture and a society in which the ability to be heard, to have your voice heard, is really important, particularly for people who might previously not have had that. The kind of training that Mind the Gap offers is really powerful in that sense. It's a pathway for students to have their own voice and to tell their stories through theatre, music and dance, and through that impact on the hearts and minds of everybody who hears them. And who wouldn't want to be involved in that in some ways? And it's been a real privilege to work with Charlie in this whole process. So that's just a few elements of the process that we've been through. And we thought it'd be useful to hear how that parallels or doesn't experiences in Sweden and France with Loisé-Mouche and Moom. So I think Justine and Annabelle, and is it Sandra are joining us? Hello. So if we can essentially ask you the same questions that Charlie and I answered. So first, if you could give a brief overview of how your organisation has engaged with performer training historically and maybe now and going forward. So could we start with Annabelle at Loisé-Mouche?
Yes, I will translate Justine.
Okay.
Justine, she's the coordinator of the actors planning. She has the whole overview of their work, whether it is training, rehearsal, performances, touring. So as such, she is very in the good, right place to answer the question.
Alors historiquement, il y a toujours eu deux leviers principaux pour former les comédiens à l'Oiseau-Mouche. Donc le premier, l'essentiel et le plus important, c'est effectivement l'apprentissage au plateau au fur et à mesure des workshops et des créations dans lesquelles les comédiens sont distribués.
So historically, L'Oiseau-Mouche has always relied on two levers to train the actors. And the first one, which is the most important one, is the stage. We don't have any formalized training. We resort to the rehearsal process and the creation process to train our actors on the spot.
On l'a dit tout à l'heure, on n'a pas de metteur en scène attitré et ça, je pense aussi que justement la diversité des projets auxquels les comédiens ont participé ont permis de développer justement plein de compétences artistiques.
Because we don't have any permanent director, the fact that we always have a new guest directors enables the actors to cross different kind of disciplines, aesthetics, different approaches, and all of each experience adds to their portfolio of skill and competencies.
Et le deuxième levier, donc, c'est la formation culturelle, qui est en fait le lieu de formation continue pour les comédiens quand ils ne sont pas au plateau.
And the second lever is the training we provide in-house. We call it the cultural training.
Où là, l'enjeu de la formation culturelle, c'est de développer et d'entretenir toutes les compétences dont les comédiens pourraient avoir besoin quand ils sont en répétition ou en création. Donc, ça va de la création d'une identité artistique à l'appropriation d'une culture générale culturelle.
So it's in-house cultural training, and it's about both affirming yourself as an artist with an artistic identity, but also developing and maintaining your technical competencies as an actor.
Et la force de la formation culturelle, du coup, c'est aussi le groupe. Parce que du coup, c'est une troupe de 20 comédiens où le doyen a fêté ses 30 ans de carrière il n'y a pas très longtemps et où le dernier arrivé a quelques mois seulement. Et où l'idée, c'est aussi que les comédiens sont vecteurs de compétences entre eux et peuvent, l'idée de la transmission dans le groupe, sachant qu'il y a des comédiens qui auront été distribués plus sur des projets chorégraphiques, et donc eux, ils apporteront ces compétences-là, d'autres comédiens qui auront beaucoup de compétences sur le texte. Voilà, l'idée de la formation culturelle, c'est aussi le groupe qui s'est basé sur les compétences du groupe, sur ce dont ils ont besoin, et donc c'est alimenté aussi énormément par les comédiens eux-mêmes.
One of our other strengths is the ensemble. We have 20 actors working together, and the most experienced can transfer and share their knowledge to the new ones. So the actors would organize a workshop between themselves where they would train, and I don't know, if someone has done several dance shows, then he or she can share the knowledge to the other ones who haven't had the experience yet.
Voilà, on part du principe que c'est pas parce qu'on n'a pas vécu soi-même quelque chose. En fait, on peut apprendre en regardant les autres faire, et on peut grandir et gagner en compétences en s'appuyant sur l'expérience des autres. Et ça, on essaye de le mobiliser aussi énormément.
We try to value as much as possible that another person's experience in the ensemble can also be part of your own experience through this process of continuously training and sharing between the actors. I would add that it's our strength, but also our weakness, because in the several years we have, I'm going further than Justine. We've had a lot of actors who left OGMIUS and lots of new ones who arrived, so the balance in the ensemble changed. We had less and less actors who had done multiple shows and who could share their knowledge to the less experienced ones. So we are looking now, and also challenged by our Erasmus Plus experience, we are looking at going towards a more formalized approach in some areas, while maintaining the importance and of the stage as the first place for training our actors.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that the model of an academy course is very much a student comes in, goes through and leaves again, as opposed to a company where they may stay. And that's something that is worth thinking about the difference between. But could we move to Sweden? And Sandra, I think if you want to respond to an overview of how MOOMs have engaged in training and maybe where you're going in the future.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I mean, our history goes back 35 years, so I'll try to keep it brief without going into too much historical detail. But I mean, we used to be a theatre group that was a part of the care system, and there was a group of actors. I think they were about 14 actors in Moomsteatern, and in around 2005, 2006, we started the journey to sort of leave the care system and go completely into the professional arts sector. And one thing we did back then was for 5 of the actors from sort of the old Moomsteatern, they were given the opportunity to go into a collaboration with the Malmö Theatre Academy, which is basically part of the university here, and get some further education there. But I mean, they also had like 10 or 15 years of experience as actors. And I think the tradition of Moomsteatern has been learning by doing. You go into production and you start working, and that's how you learn things, with experiences. But when it was time for us to recruit again, we didn't have an academy like what Mind the Gap has described. And it's in Sweden, like in most countries, that the sort of higher education system is closed to people with learning disabilities. So we didn't really know where to turn to find new actors for our ensemble. And so in 2010, we actually created our own sort of internal academy, but it was like a one thing, just 3 years, 3 actors that were then hired by Moomsteatern. Because I think an important an important thing for us is that we employ our actors as well. And there's a lot of things they need to learn, except for the profession as an actor. There are other things that comes with being employed, I think, that they need to learn. But since then, those 3 actors that were hired in 2010 are Dennis, Therese, and Frida. They are still with us. And since then, we have recruited new actors by giving them long-term internships, completely learning by doing. And at the moment, we have 5 actors employed by Moomsteatern and 2 actors in that kind of internship. But to us, I mean, it's quite, what's the word, like a sensitive way of doing it, because we don't have anyone else there sort of waiting to come into Moomsteatern. And, you know, we rely a lot on like 2 people on internships. So very recently, we are just about to start an academy in collaboration with the Care and Support Administration in Malmö Council, where seven people will have the opportunity to sort of develop skills to prepare them for professional acting, to work with us, to work with another theatre. And our project, our OGMIUS project, has sort of inspired a lot of that in us building that academy. It's just about to start, but I mean, we've had a look at what Mind the Gap does, and we've learned a lot from that, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really exciting kind of times and prospects. So sticking with you, Sandra, we obviously talked a lot about assessment and feedback, and I don't know whether you've engaged with that or whether you're steering very clear of that in the new academy, or what your thoughts are in terms of that. So yeah, how are you engaging with ideas of feedback, assessment, and those kind of issues that get raised when you formalise, or if you formalise processes?
We're not, I don't think we're not going to go into formalizing things as in, because this won't be a part of the educational system. I mean, it will be interesting, but I think that will be the next step for us. I think we need to get this started first, is the sort of short answer to that. Mm-hmm. And assessment, I mean, it's difficult. Of course, it's something we work with our actors here as well, in feedback and all of that. But I think it is a challenge. And I think some of the challenges are, like what you said before, Matthew, about thinking that feedback and assessment is about something negative. In my experience, it's about, for a lot of our actors, when they start with us, it's more like it's black and white. Either I have failed or I am a success. So we try to work a lot with, like, feedback is everything in between that, and having someone telling you that you have done something wrong or you need to get better at this is actually helpful, and it does not mean that you have failed. Yeah, but how to bring that into our future academy is yet for us to see, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the lessons, anybody who teaches will recognize that experience of feedback in all sorts of levels, and that's really interesting. Moving back to Annabelle and Justine, your thoughts on assessment, feedback, and those questions.
Alors nous, les principaux, en tout cas la question de l'évaluation, c'est notamment pendant les workshops. Donc il y a des artistes différents qui viennent toute l'année passer une semaine avec une partie du groupe. Et on va dire que voilà, ces workshops et la discussion qui en découle avec les artistes vont être source de critères d'évaluation, ou en tout cas de critères de progression.
So the assessment at Erasmus comes from the artists in almost all cases, because we don't have any artistic presence here at Erasmus as a permanent staff. And our actors, they work with different directors throughout the years. We organize workshops that do not lead to production, just workshop where they can experiment and play around different universe aesthetics. And usually at the end of a workshop week, we go back to the artist and ask him or her to give his or her view of each actor, what are the strengths, the weaknesses, what we could work on.
Ouais, voilà, les questions principales, c'est vraiment quelles sont les zones de confort, finalement, l'acteur, dans quoi il est à l'aise, dans quoi il prend beaucoup de plaisir. À l'inverse, quelles sont les zones d'inconfort et les endroits qui sont plus difficiles ou plus complexes. Et voilà, alors ça, c'est aussi toute l'aventure Erasmus qui nous aide beaucoup à développer cette démarche, mais l'étape d'après, ça serait de poser exactement la même chose aux comédiens à l'issue de chaque workshop.
So that's something that we did with the artist leading the workshops, but not in a formalized way. We definitely don't have a culture of assessment here, but we try to change and do a mix and influenced by the Erasmus project. And now we try to write everything down and to keep track of each actor's evolution throughout the workshop project he or she is on. And the next step would be to do the other way around and ask the actors to evaluate himself or herself throughout the year and compare and contrast with what we got from the leaders of the workshop.
Et grâce à l'aventure Erasmus toujours, merci Erasmus, merci OGMIUS, c'est la question de l'image, de la vidéo et de la photo. Donc on essaye aussi beaucoup plus maintenant, que ce soit pendant les workshops ou en création, de filmer, de photographier, d'enregistrer, pour qu'ensuite il y ait tout un travail de se regarder, parce que finalement quand on est en train de pratiquer, on voit pas ce qu'on est en train de faire, pour justement aussi être dans cette idée, bon bah maintenant que je me vois, il n'y a pas que l'artiste finalement qui peut avoir un avis sur ce que moi j'ai produit. Moi, qu'est-ce que j'en pense après coup, c'est pas l'impression que j'avais eue. Je pensais me placer comme ça alors qu'en fait j'étais placée comme ça. Bon voilà. Il y a aussi tout ce travail de l'image qui est.
And also thanks to Erasmus, we try to implement more and more photos and videos in our daily practice with the actors, because that's something we didn't do before. And we know how important it is for the actors to see themselves, to be able to assess and evaluate how they are doing. And it's also important that they can be able to see them and develop an opinion on their practice, aside from the artist's point of view, the artistic leader's point of view. And I think we are trying to navigate between our culture, which is essentially the director is God, and if God says so, then okay. And so we know it's our culture, and it will stay very much rooted in our practice, but we try to mix it with new ways, new perspectives, and always finding a way for the actors to lead on their own evaluation and assessment.
Thank you. That's really interesting. The importance of the artists themselves having some sense of their own progress is absolutely vital there, and that whether that's understanding of feedback or understanding of assessment and so on. We've had quite a few questions come up, so I was going to turn to those now and combine the first two actually to go to each country. So there's two questions here which kind of connects. So from Jane and Katrina, the first asking about where the students come from, and how are these financed? Where does the money come from, I guess? And then how do you, from Katrina, how do you balance the demand? So once people are coming, what are the realistic expectations people have once they are in training for future careers? Are they oversubscribed and those things? So I guess it's some pragmatic questions about where students come from, how students are financed, where they might go afterwards, and those two. So Charlie first, and then to Annabelle and Sandra.
Yeah, to answer the first question, where do our artists come from? They come from very many different places. We're working really hard at the moment on a schools programme to really support us to bring more people, not that we're not oversubscribed, but to find those people, especially that would be right for this particular course. A lot of the training at Mind the Gap is at different levels, so we encourage anyone to come and have a taster at Mind the Gap and get to know us a little better, and to just give them all the information about all the things that we offer. So we get referrals from social services, we get a lot of young people come from schools. We provide a lot of opportunities to engage in schools and for schools to come and work with us and experience workshops and how we work here. So yeah, and quite a lot, well, most of our students on the training programs either pay through social services, so through their local council, or through personal budgets. They generally seem to be the most popular way for people to pay for the training.
And it'd be interesting to see how that is different in different countries. So Sandra, where do the students, you talked about finding the interns in the past, and where does the finance, I guess, come from? Okay, how to find them is still an interesting question to us, because we haven't quite started yet, so they're not really there yet. But here is one thing where we have been inspired by Mind the Gap, where we've been thinking that we're going to do like trial workshops or open house and sort of, you know, get out there and meet as many people as possible. We were supposed to do that last year, but it's been quite hard to meet as many people as possible. So we're hoping that we've got more of that in front of us. But we're thinking that people can come in and try it out for a day, for a week, and see what it's like, so that they get a picture of what it is, and we sort of get to meet them. That's how we're thinking about doing it. And the financing for this is, I mean, it's Malmö Council really that's opening a new daycare center for 7 people. So they are providing with the house, the room, and a person working there who is who's going to lead on it from their side. But then it's going to be us at Moomsteatern also like filling it up with the content. So it's about using our resources to do that, which is more about time than money, I think. And I mean, we're going to run it like, we're thinking that these students that will be there, they will spend a lot of time here, hanging out at rehearsals or taking part of our plays, of our productions in small parts, and sort of grow into the profession. That's the idea. Thank you. And Annabelle and Justine?
Alors nous, quand on admet, alors déjà les comédiens à la compagnie, ils arrivent d'un petit peu partout en France, parce que pendant très longtemps, alors c'est plus le cas depuis quelques années, mais pendant quand même près de 40 ans, on était le seul endroit en France qui proposait l'opportunité, en tout cas qui donnait l'opportunité à des personnes en situation de handicap d'exercer ce métier-là.
So we've been around for 40 years. So for a long time, we were almost alone in offering a full-time acting position for people with learning disabilities. So we had a massive amount of applicants from all over France. I think maybe less than 25% of our ensemble actually comes from the region where we are.
Et ensuite, alors forcément, il y a un décalage entre. Alors au niveau du financement, du coup, nous on est financé des deux côtés. Donc on est une structure sociale, donc on est financé par l'État de ce côté-là. Et on reçoit également des subventions dues à notre statut de compagnie professionnelle. Donc c'est ça notre avantage, mais qui fait aussi qu'on est un petit peu un ovni dans le paysage, c'est qu'on est vraiment financé par les deux côtés.
So in terms of funds, so we are not a school, we are a theater company, but we receive money from the state, the region, the city council as a theater company for our production, for touring, etc. But we also receive money from the state as a social institution in a way. We are a work facility, which is an institution that only exists in France, where you provide work for people with disability in a protected environment. So that's a very French thing, but that's our organization, and that enables us to receive funds from the health sector of the government, which helps fund Justine's work, etc. But we also receive money from arts budgets, which is super important in order to stay a professional theater company. And sometimes the government would like to switch us back to the social sector, and we're like, no, we want the hard budget because it says something about our company and our work.
Et ensuite, pour gérer le décalage du coup entre les attentes, ce que les personnes projettent, en tout cas sur ce que c'est qu'être comédien ou comédienne, et la réalité, c'est qu'une fois qu'on a vérifié les aptitudes artistiques des personnes au plateau, donc le tout premier stage, il se fait vraiment sur scène pour vérifier ces compétences-là.
So when we are looking at integrating new people, we go all through a process where we first invite them on stage for 3 days with a director we know to test what's happening on stage. You don't have to be a professional actor already, but there must be something happening on stage.
Ensuite, on propose, donc pour les personnes pour qui ce premier stage a été concluant, on propose 3 semaines en formation culturelle, parce qu'effectivement, moi j'imagine que comédien, c'est que des paillettes, c'est récolter les applaudissements, c'est monter sur scène, être regardé par tout le monde. Ben non, en fait, ça reste un métier quand même très ingrat, avec beaucoup de travail qui n'est pas du tout vu. Enfin voilà, il y a vraiment un côté très difficile quand même dans le métier. Refaire.
And in order to manage this balance between expectation and reality, we, after the 3 days on stage, we offer 3 weeks of internship inside OGMIUS, but not on stage, with the actor through our permanent cultural training, to see what it's really like to be an actor, and the glamorous part of being on stage and applauded by an audience is really small compared to the hard work you have to do every day. So that's usually a good check on reality for the applicants.
Et on sait qu'on a, enfin en tout cas on nous a prouvé plusieurs fois qu'on avait raison, parce qu'en fait après ces 3 semaines-là, il y a des personnes qui avaient très envie de revenir à l'Oiseau-Mouche, qui finalement ont refusé la place qu'on leur proposait, parce que justement ça leur avait permis de se rendre compte que non, c'est pas à ça que je m'attendais, non, je m'attendais pas à cette exigence-là, non, je pensais pas qu'il fallait autant de discipline, non, je me vois pas travailler en troupe tous les jours, puisqu'il y a aussi la vie de groupe qui est très importante et qui convient pas à tout le monde. Donc voilà, il y a toute une session de stage et de préparation pour être sûr que, ok, la réalité c'est ça, est-ce que c'est bien ce que je veux, quoi.
And at the end of this 3 weeks internship inside OGMIUS, some people drop the process because they realize that it's not all about the glitter. And that's important, that we can offer the 360 degrees around what it means to come inside OGMIUS. Je pense que j'ai raté un morceau. Oh, good.
Thank you. In terms of the question about balancing demand for courses with the expectations of careers, that of course is a question asked of universities as well, where we have lots of students doing theatre, music and dance, who many more than there are careers in those areas. And just to add, in terms of the finance, one of the interesting developments is Mind the Gap are now a higher education provider in the UK, which means there's a potential additional source of funding. Students could apply for government loans. So it kind of opens up, as well as the arts, as well as health and education funding in this context.
Can I just add one thing to the financing question, Matthew? First of all, what you just said, I think is immensely interesting that Mind the Gap will be a part of higher education, because that is such a step forward, I think. But what I didn't say when it comes to financing is where Moomsteatern's financing comes from. Because I only talked about the new academy we were doing. And I think that's what Annabelle said is important to us, that we left the social sector and we get the foundation of our financing from the arts councils, the regional, the local, and the national here in Sweden. I would just like to clear that out. Sorry.
Thank you. Just turning to the questions, there's one from Tim Wheeler, which I guess is directed to me to answer best, about whether, I guess it's are inclusive and accessible criteria open to learning disabled students at York St John on our own courses. Short answer to that is yes. The slightly longer one is yes in theory, and the third one is it's complex. There is a principle of that alternative or open assessments can be given, so the notion of universal design in some ways. We have a number of students on our BA theatre course who have autism, and that responds to that. The interesting challenge for us and for universities, if a prospective graduate from the certificate in higher education from Mind the Gap finishes level 4 and they want to come and do level 5 and level 6 at York St John, that will be great, and that will be a real challenge for the university to live up to what it says it does in terms of inclusive and accessible assessment. So hopefully those kind of things can push the university to do more in those kind of areas. I don't think that fully answers the question, but it is a really important thing to look at, that there doesn't become a kind of divide between the mainstream and the specialised in some ways. In terms of Ben Petit Wade asks whether the documentation we're going to make open access and other people can form partnerships with other higher education institutions. Absolutely, yes. Hopefully this is an example that will influence the sector, that will demonstrate that it's possible to other universities, that will encourage that. In the UK, universities have a strong mission at the moment around widening participation and what's called civic engagement. So other universities hopefully will be looking at these kind of things in different sectors, and I'm sure there's other interesting practice going on as well. And Anna has a question. I'm really interested in assessments. Are they written or are they based on portfolio, photo and Visio evidence? Charlie, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, one of the big things we were really keen on while we were sort of kind of making sure this program was the right program was that, there's a lot of barriers to assessment, and as Matthew discussed with just the word assessment. So we are, we've not started the program yet, but in our pilot year, we hope to test all the types of things that we have put into place for people to meet assessment requirements. So most of the course is practically based. We're not having, just to answer sort of Ben's question as well, another part of his question was how much have we had to change about the program. And we've tried, the aim was not to try and do too much change. We already knew that it was something that was already really high level and that we just needed to tighten a few things in order to get it validated. So in terms of how it practically runs, not too much is changing, but we have had to think a lot about how to make assessment accessible. So we're doing various things, a portfolio of evidence on some of the modules, which can be video format, it can be written should people want to. And then a lot of the assessment is continuous assessment. So we'll be through observation of practical work, sort of feedback in groups, one-to-one sessions where they discuss with tutors and support workers how they feel they've been achieving. So yeah, lots of different ways that will make sure none of it's a barrier to people. I hope that answers that question.
I think, echoing Sandra's comment about learning through doing, it's an embodied practice, and that's very much the skill that we want to assess. So portfolio, but the portfolio might be of all sorts of different elements. And I think the comments from Loiseau Mouche is really important about the peer-to-peer-ness of a process, of a cohort going through the course. I think that's the last question we have. So just to end on, the final kind of thing that Charlie and I reflected on was on the benefits of engaging with training for learning disabled and or autistic performers. So just to give Loisé Mouche and Mooms a chance to answer that, particularly as you've got new initiatives in the pipeline, what are the benefits? Why engage with formalizing training? Sandra, if I can turn to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to answer what the benefits of training are, because I think everyone realizes that there are only benefits to that. But the formalized part, I think the biggest benefit of that is this sort of the status of your work, the fact that our actors actually, and I think that's true for all of us, they struggle to be taken seriously because of history, because of what our society has looked like historically. I think they struggle to be taken seriously, and because their skills are sometimes, in my experience, different to the skills that you might have if you've gone to the university, for example. So I think formalizing their skills, putting a stamp on what they've done to say, actually, here's an education, look at what I've done, look at what I can do, it could make a huge change to our entire business, I think.
Thank you. And finally, to Annabelle and Justine.
Yeah, exactly the same train of thought than Sandra. It's our actors, they usually didn't go to school. They never had access to any form of certification or diploma, well, most of them. And I know that they're eager for this recognition as well. It's the same feeling of never being taken seriously and just never given the opportunity to challenge themselves towards this certification. What we would like to go to is we played around this idea of creating our own academy or school at some point, because we were all influenced by Mind the Gap splendid model. But now we would like to, because we don't have a structure of resources, and because we want also to take a political stand, is to work with the theater schools, the drama schools that already exist in France, and none of them are accessible to learning disabled people. You can barely make it if you have a physical disability, but if you're learning a disabled person, it's virtually impossible. So our next step in the following years is to knock on doors and start asking questions nicely, but start asking them, and maybe it will take the form of helping some of our newest actors to access their training in this theater school. Maybe it will be something different, but we want to take this route towards a more formalized training, in terms of more formalized, to have the courses and artists intervening, etc. And yes, maybe towards certification, but what we would like is really to open the doors that are closed right now to our actors.
Et si je peux rajouter juste un petit truc, à très court terme, du coup, là, l'enjeu, ça a été d'essayer de rapprocher au maximum ce qui se passe en formation culturelle de ce qui se passe justement dans les écoles. Donc aussi en se disant que plus on partagera les mêmes éléments de langage, plus on se sera penché sur les mêmes domaines de compétences et sur les mêmes acquisitions, et bien moins ils auront de raison finalement de dire que finalement c'est pas possible, quoi.
Yes, and we are starting our journey, and by asking them to share their own program and evaluation, assessment criteria, so that we can use them inside Loisé Mouche and maybe show them that the gap is clearly not that huge, and yeah, starting working with them like that.
Thank you very much. So hopefully this has been an interesting session, both to give insight into the new validated program at Mind the Gap, but also some of the differences and similarities in approaches in different contexts there's lots of different ways of engaging with this, but I think we've run out of time. It's 4:15 in the UK. So Jonathan, is it a break now? Or can you guide us into the next stage of this process?